when it comes in the exam, firstly you will describe what you see. That is, firstly you will tell what organ it is. So this is a spongy organ, okay? Spongy solid organ. That is the lung. Now, how do you say that it's a lung? Because you can see the major bronchi and the bronchioles here. All right, here. Then what is the pathology? Next thing is the pathology. There is a gray-white colored variegated appeared lesion, okay, just beneath the hilum, and it is spreading to the adjacent lung tissues. So what is it? It's a bronchogenic carcinoma. All right. So whenever a specimen comes, you will describe about the parent organ. You will give a description of the parent organ, and then you will describe the pathology which you see, and then come on to the diagnosis. All right. This is another specimen of the lung. So even here, firstly you'll see a spongy organ, then you can see the hilum, and then there is a tumor growth. All right. So the next question which comes is lung tumors. You can roughly say, depending on their location in the lung, there are different types of lung tumors. So we usually say that more often adenocarcinomas are peripherally located towards the pleura, and your squamous cell carcinomas are located towards the central or the hilar region. So you can further add on to your diagnosis, like depending on the location of the tumor, you can roughly predict what type of tumor it would be. But then confirmation of that can be made only on microscopy. On microscopy, your adenocarcinomas will show you malignant glands. What are the features of malignancy in a malignant gland? You will find high NC ratio, the nuclei will be darkly stained, the nuclear features will be more coarse, okay, and there would be marked pleomorphism. So this is how you'll differentiate it from normal glands. So this is adenocarcinoma. Whereas in squamous cell carcinomas, what you find? In squamous cell carcinomas, you'll find keratin pearls. There would be squamatization of the cells. So there would be intracellular as well as extracellular keratin and keratin bridges would be there. Okay. So on microscopy, this is how you'll confirm the diagnosis. So now let's come on to the questions which would be asked on these specimens. Okay. The first question, most commonly asked question is, what are the predisposing factors to carcinoma lung? Now, there are various factors. Cigarette smoking is the most important one. Then industrial hazards, which has your metals as well as ionizing radiations, air pollution, and genetic susceptibility. So various types of mutations are associated with their particular types of tumors that you'll have to again that will be asked again. The next question which is asked is, what are the histological classification of bronchogenic carcinoma? Okay, you can broadly divide these tumors into squamous cell, small cell, then adenocarcinomas can be further divided. Then there are large cell carcinomas, adenosquamous, carcinoid, and carcinomas of salivary gland type. All right, this classification is important. Now there is another entity called as adenocarcinoma in situ. So earlier it was called as bronchioalveolar carcinoma, but now we use the term adenocarcinoma in situ. It is used for lesions which are less than 3 centimeters. Okay, and they are composed entirely of dysplastic cells which grow along the pre-existing alveolar septi. All right, this growth is also called as lipidic growth pattern. So earlier there were tumors called as lipidic, but now this growth pattern is called as lipidic, and that term in the tumor is not used anymore. Okay. Then again, the next question which could be asked would be, what are the anatomical complications of lung carcinoma? So your lung carcinoma will obstruct the airways when the growth happens in the lung. So if there is partial obstruction, it could lead to emphysema. If there is total obstruction, it could lead to atelectasis. Then there would be other things like lung abscess formation, bronchiectasis, bronchitis, then SPC syndrome, and then pericarditis, pleuritis, depending on the location of the tumors. Okay. Now coming on to the paraneoplastic syndromes associated with this. So these are also very commonly asked questions. Okay. So they'll ask you what the histological types are and what are the paraneoplastic syndromes associated with them. So with small cell carcinomas, your ACTH and ADH production is there. So the patient might present with symptoms of ACTH and ADH production rather than any lung symptoms. Okay. As squamous cell carcinomas are associated with hypercalcemia. Now, as I told you before, with your specific mutations, the type of lung carcinomas could be asked. So P53 associated with squamous cell carcinomas and KRAS is with adenocarcinoma. Okay. So these paraneoplastic syndromes, there is a table given in your neoplasia chapter, which very nicely describes the paraneoplastic syndromes associated with lung tumors. And there could be a clinical case, which could come, which would show only the clinical signs and symptoms of the paraneoplastic syndrome and not the lung symptoms, okay? Which eventually would lead to the diagnosis of lung tumors once there is PET scan or CT scan of the lung. So please keep these in mind. Paraneoplastic syndromes is an important question. Okay. So this I've taken from the table in the Robbins only, the various hormones and the paraneoplastic syndromes associated with lung carcinoma. So with ADH, hyponatremia, with ACTH, Cushing's syndrome will be there, with PTH, hypercalcemia, with calcitonin, hypocalcemia. If there are gonadotropin production, gynecomastia can be there. And with serotonin and bradykinins, carcinoid syndromes could be there. All right, this you have to memorize, it's important. Now, what is azopyre effect? This is sometimes asked in your MCQs and maybe in your exam if you're doing well. So it's seen in high-grade small cell carcinoma of lung. Okay. Now, what is it? There are blood vessels near the tumor which we stain with HME, that is hematoxylin and eosin. So these blood vessels, they exhibit full thickness basophilic staining. Now, why does this occur? It occurs due to deposition of the DNA and other necrotic materials within the vessel wall of highly growing tumors. Okay, this is azopyre effect. Now next, so earlier we saw the gross of bronchogenic carcinoma. Okay, the tumor was arising from the tissue of the lung itself. Whereas if you differentiate it from metastatic lung carcinomas will have multiple nodules, all right, and they would be well defined, scattered multiple nodules. Now in this specific gross, these nodules are scattered throughout the substance, throughout the tissue of the lung, but usually, like most commonly, we say that they are in the lower lobe of the lung and towards the peripheries. Okay, so these coin-like lesions, we typically describe them as coin-like lesions, all right, on radiography also. So these scattered, well-defined nodules are characteristic of metastatic lung diseases. Now, what would be the questions asked with this gross? They'll firstly ask the path of metastasis. So metastasis can be either through lymphatic route or hematogenous. Now, most commonly affected organs are adrenals. Then liver, brain, and bone are also affected. Okay. Now coming on to pleural fluid analysis. So when do we analyze the pleural fluid? When there is pleural effusion. What is pleural effusion? It is the excessive accumulation of pleural fluid between the pleural layers. Okay. Now, why is there this excessive accumulation? There is either imbalance in the production or the clearance of the pleural fluid. Okay, so this is not a specific disease, but there are various underlying pathologies which lead to the pleural effusion. Okay, so the pathologies could be in the lung, pleura, or through a systemic disease. Okay, now how is there excessive production of the pleural fluid. So there are mainly two processes which are happening. Okay, there is alteration in the permeability of the proteins. Okay, so there is this equation. I don't know whether you've studied, known as Starling equation. Okay, you apply that Starling equation to the pleural fluid production. Okay, so one is the alteration of permeability of the proteins, and the other is the alteration in the driving pressure, encompassing a change in the P or the COP of the parietal or vestral pleura. Now this pleura becomes more permeable to the fluid and large molecular weight components of the blood, which leads to the exudative type of pleural effusion. Right? This exudative type of pleural effusion is most commonly seen in inflammatory and neoplastic diseases. Whereas when there is just alteration in the driving pressure, okay, there is accumulation of the transudative type of fluid. Okay, this transudative type of fluid is most commonly seen in heart failures and hypoproteinemias. Okay. Now there is this third mechanism which is different from these. In this, the pleural fluid originates from the peritoneum, okay, like the ascitic fluid, and then it travels to the pleural space. Okay, now coming on to these transudative, the etiologies of the transudative and the exudative type of pleural effusions. So in transudative, there is increased hydrostatic pressure. Okay, it's an overflow type of thing. So the overflow of liquid from the lung interstitium is happening. And decreased plasma or oncotic pressure is there, okay, like in nephrotic syndrome. Whereas in exudative, इसमें क्या क्या होगा? Inflammatory etiology is there. Most common cause is TB. Okay, and then there are various disorders like connective tissue disorders like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and when the adjacent organs are affected like pancreatitis, subphrenic abscesses, as well as malignant tumors. So in tumors, you will see exudative type of pleural effusion. Then other tumors like Meek syndrome. What is Meek syndrome? Can anybody tell me what is Meek syndrome? Hi, can anybody tell me? Can anybody type in what is Meek syndrome? No? No one? Meek syndrome, it's a triad of benign ovarian tumors with ascites and pleural effusion. Okay, it usually resolves after the resection of the tumor. So when there are benign ovarian tumors, yeah, there is ascites and pleural effusion. That is Meek's tumor. Okay. Now, whenever there is pleural effusion, what will be the symptoms with which the patient will present? Okay, so the symptoms, they depend on the size of the effusion, okay, and on the underlying process. Just a second. So your inflammatory processes will present with pleuritic chest pain, and when the effusion is very large, the patient will present with dyspnea. A small or moderate size effusion will otherwise will not have dyspnea. Okay, and if the inflammatory or the infective nature of the that lesion is there, the fever is also commonly present. Now, how will you make out what type of pleural effusion is there based on the history? History of cardiac, renal, or liver impairment will suggest transudative effusion. Okay. Whereas old age, weight loss, and history of smoking will point out towards malignant pleural effusion. If there is recent leg swelling or DVT, it may result in effusion related to just pleural effusion. Trauma may result in hemothorax or chylothorax. Now there is a phenomena known as there is a syndrome known as pulmonary cardiac. It's known as pulmonary cardiac injury syndrome. So in cases of cardiac surgery, if there is fever, dyspnea, pleuritic chest pain, after 3 weeks of following that surgery, PCIs may have taken place. Okay? So please keep these histories in mind whenever you're reading. These will point out towards the etiology of your effusion and help you in coming on to the diagnosis. Now coming on to the physical examination. Once the patient presents with all these symptoms, you will carry forward a physical examination. So on physical examination, the movement will be diminished. There will be fullness of intercostal space. Trail sign will be positive on the opposite side. Okay. The trachea and the apex beat may be shifted depending on the amount of fluid. Then the region overlying the fluid is dull. When you do the percussion of that region, it will be dull. Okay. Delayed shifting dullness may be present, and it's absent in massive and loculated effusion. Now, breath sounds may be decreased. Okay. When you do the investigations on X-ray, these are checked X-ray films. As you can see, there is blunting of the borders of the lung, wherever the fluid is accumulated. Can you see the pointer here? See, look, the fluid is accumulated here and there is blunting. Okay, the ends are not sharp. Look at this X-ray. This is showing the Ellis S-shaped curve. Okay, this S-shaped curve. This is showing massive pleural effusion. So the patient came to you depending on the type of the effusion. There were histories, and then you carried out your X-ray and you found out that there is pleural effusion. Now you may also do an ultrasonography of the thorax. Okay? Why ultrasonography? It helps in detecting very small amounts of fluid. And in cases of loculated pleural effusion, okay? Because in loculated pleural effusion, you have to be confirmed, you'll have to have a confirmed site of aspiration. All right. Then also it helps in differentiating between fluid-filled and solid lesions. This is the image of ultrasonography. The arrows, the white arrows are showing the effusion in the lungs. The black areas are lungs, air. Now, once you've established that there is pleural effusion, you will carry out thoracocentesis. And after that, once you have the fluid, then you'll send that fluid for cytobiochemical analysis. Okay. So what are the indications? These you can read. Now, after the diagnostic, so once you do the diagnostic tab, firstly, the tab can be done either for therapeutic purposes and for diagnostic purposes. For therapeutic purposes, when is it done? When there is massive pleural effusion and the patient is not able to breathe, there is dyspnea. Okay. For diagnosis purposes, we need to diagnose whether the etiology of the pleural effusion. Okay. So the most crucial part is to differentiate whether it is a transudative type of pleural effusion or an exudate type. So there are Light's criteria for exudative pleural effusion. What are those? When the pleural fluid protein divided by the serum protein is more than 0.5, the pleural LDH divided by the serum LDH is more than 0.6, the pleural fluid LDH is more than 2/3 of the upper limit of the normal serum LDH. Okay. It's a very, this criteria has a very high sensitivity. Okay. 98% sensitivity. Also, a total nucleated cell count of more than 1000 per ml is taken as exudative type. When the count is more than 10,000 per ml, it is parapneumonic. Okay? In those count, when you carry out the TLC and the DLC of the count, so the TLC is very much raised. When you carry out the DLC, that is the differential, you look for three things. Okay, first is whether there is lymphocytosis, second is whether there is neutrophilia, or thirdly whether you are finding any large atypical malignant cells. So if there is lymphocytosis, it points out towards TB, or sometimes in malignancies, neutrophilia is bacterial infection. And if there are large atypical cells, it could be a lung tumor. Okay? Then this is just seeing the morphology of that fluid. Okay, when you carry out the TLC and the DLC, what are the other biochemical tests which you'll carry out? You'll see the glucose concentration. The glucose concentration is usually reduced. Okay, if it is reduced, then what type of pleural effusion is there if it is reduced? Can anybody tell me? Written also. Bacterial. Okay, but if you want to differentiate it from exudative and transudative, what will you call it? Exudative, it's written also. Yeah. So then sugar, then you look out for proteins and LDH and amylase. If there is increase in pleural fluid amylase, it points out towards pancreatic diseases. Yeah, and malignancies also sometimes. Lymphocytosis indicates what? Lymphocytosis indicates tuberculosis. Most commonly tuberculosis in India, especially. Pleural effusion, if there is pleural effusion, if there is high TLC and you see predominantly lymphocytes, you will make a diagnosis of tuberculosis. Okay. So now this is the question now. If there is a 32-year-old female presenting with chronic cough, which is associated with sputum. There is weight loss, night sweats, evening rise of temperature. She's come to the emergency with sudden dyspnea and fever. Okay. On X-ray, we noted pleural effusion. So we did the pleural tap, and when we examined that pleural fluid, it had raised TLC, that is 2000. Lymphocytes were more, glucose was low, pleural fluid protein was raised. Okay. Diagnosis, tuberculosis. Okay. Now, what are the pointers towards TB here? Chronic cough with sputum. Now, these three things which we most commonly associate with tuberculosis. Okay? These constitutional symptoms like weight loss, night sweats, and evening rise of temperature. It's present in TB. All right. Now, she had pleural effusion. How? There was sudden dyspnea and fever. Okay? Then other pointers are lymphocytosis on pleural fluid examination. So this is how you make the diagnosis of tuberculosis. Now, if there will be, let's just modify this history. And if there is, instead of 32 years, if there is an elderly patient like a 75-year-old male with history of smoking and also with weight loss, and he comes to the emergency with sudden dyspnea and fever, chest X-ray, you find pleural effusion. And then when you do the pleural examination, the TLC is again raised, and you find large atypical malignant cells. The nature of the cells is not known. Okay. So what will be the diagnosis then? Malignancy, yes. Malignancy ho gaya na, lung carcinoma. So in this, when the diagnosis was TB, you will start the patient on antitubercular drugs. But if you are suspecting lung carcinoma on your pleural fluid examination, you will send the patient for further investigations, okay, further radiological investigations like CT scan, which will tell you where the mass is actually located. Okay. So now lung tumors have usually have a poor prognosis. The most of them, like 95 to 98%, have very poor prognosis. All right. So the patients present in their last stages. Okay. So now there are these cases based on the exfoliative cytology of the lung. What is exfoliative cytology? In this, we aspirate or we take out the cells from the lung. Okay, what are the types of exfoliative cytology procedures which we do? One is BAL, B-A-L, that is bronchoalveolar lavage. All right, then there are bronchial washings which are there. Then you can also take out biopsies. Okay, EBUS, E-B-U-S. Okay, endobronchial biopsies. So BAL, BAL is very commonly done in patients. In this, we take out just the cells. Okay, exfoliative cytology means we are just brushing and taking out individual cells and not the tissue. So this is a less invasive procedure coming on to lung biopsies. Okay, in comparison to lung biopsies, lung biopsies are very invasive and not. They are usually not indicated. Okay. So this history is of a 56-year-old male who is a chronic smoker. He presented with chronic cough, hemoptysis, and chest pain. Also complained of weight loss and easy fatigability. The CT lung showed a mass in the upper lobe at the periphery. Okay. This is the BAL of this patient. Okay. In this photo, you can see firstly pleomorphic cells. Okay. And these cells are also, few of them are showing binucleation and multinucleation, and there are few cells which are very giant and bizarre. Okay, so the first thing which will come to your mind is that it is a malignancy. Now, what type of malignancy? So, in when you see cells in BAL in adenocarcinomas, few cells, if you see very um, carefully, they show your signet rings in this. Okay, what are signet ring cells? They are filled with mucin, so the nuclei are pushed peripherally. All right, so these signet ring cells are present in adenocarcinomas. Okay, mucinous adenocarcinomas. So these signet ring cells will point out towards adenocarcinoma, and what else? These cells make a 3D ball type of a cluster. So this cluster is that of a 3D cluster. EBUS is not an exfoliative cytology. Actually, it's the biopsy. Exfoliative cytology is BAL and bronchial washings. All right. So when you see all these features, that is features of pleomorphism, signet ring type of cells, and 3D clusters, you'll come on to a diagnosis of adenocarcinoma. So these pictures in BAL fluids are not asked in your exam. It's just for your knowledge that you should know the types of uh, investigations which can be done, okay, for lung tumors. Now next, 45 years old male, HIV positive, presented with complaint of fever, dyspnea, cough and chest pain since 1 week. On examination, crackles were present, okay. BAL from that patient showed the following. Now, what can you see here? Uh, the whole slide is filled with these various small circular pathogens which have What do they have? They have a peripheral capsule also. Okay. So these are Cryptococcus neoformans. All right, your Cryptococcus has a capsule made up of glycogen. So this is a case of Cryptococcus. Now, what are the other pointers pointing out towards Cryptococcus? It presents in immunocompromised patients. So this patient is that of HIV. Okay, in HIV positive patients, when they have lung infection, it could be cryptococcal. All right. So I'll just briefly summarize what we studied today. If anybody has any doubt, please let me know. So the most important parts which you need to, which we need to emphasize and take home message for from this lecture is the gross and the microscopic specimens. Okay, they are the most important ones. Crackle, yeah, crackle. This the clinicians will be able to tell you. जब auscultate करते हैं, तो auscultation में there are various types of sounds which you see na lung में. Wheeze is there, crackle is there. अलग अलग type की sounds होती है, so crackles are present. अच्छा अब so these are the most important ones. Okay, एक तो first bronchogenic carcinoma which is commonly asked in the exam. So please first describe the specimen, name the parent organ, and then describe the pathology, and then come on to the diagnosis. Okay, so describe the parent organ. This may you will tell that it's a spongy organ, and you can see the major bronchi and the bronchus. So it's the specimen of a lung, and then you will describe the cut section. In the cut section, you see a growth which is variegated in gray white, and it is just adjacent to the hilum. Okay? So after bronchogenic carcinoma, then on microscopy you should know what you see in adenocarcinomas, squamous cell carcinomas. Then all these questions you'll have to memorize. But the difference between bronchogenic and metastatic lung carcinomas, okay, on gross, very important. Then classification of bronchogenic carcinomas, very important. Okay. Then pleural fluid analysis. In pleural fluid analysis, on your level, you should know about the types of pleural effusion, that is exudative and transjudative, Light's criteria, how you differentiate between these two on their etiologies. Exudative is present in what all conditions, transjudative is present in what all conditions. This you should know. Then when we do a pleural tap, about the pleural fluid examination, what all analysis we do, the cytochemical analysis, and the TLC, DLC. Okay, on the DLC, you should know in what all cases lymphocytosis is present, neutrophilia is present in what all. Then next, you should know with which pipette you do the pleural fluid analysis. Okay, so you have your Neubauer's chamber in which you count the TLC of any fluid. So in that Neubauer's chamber, with which type of pipette will you charge that Neubauer's chamber for pleural fluid analysis? Can anybody tell me? WBC pipette. Okay, with the WBC pipette. Now, why? Like, you don't need to mug it up. So, how do you memorize that you will charge you the WBC pipette and not an RBC pipette? So, the count, the TLC count is comparable to your WBC count. Okay, so the dilution factor will depend on that. That is why WBC pipette. Okay, now, what was the question? Yeah, count as less. Okay, so these are the questions which are asked with pleural fluid analysis. Now, few other questions which could be asked are how do you charge a Neubauer's chamber? Why is the Neubauer's chamber called as modified Neubauer's chamber? What are the modifications in that Neubauer's chamber? Okay. Then lymphocytosis and all be covered. Then questions could be asked about tuberculosis. Then exfoliative cytology can be asked, like bronchial washings, BAL. The procedure will not be asked for BAL and bronchial washings. And the you won't be asked about these pictures also, which I just showed you. You should just know what bronchial washings and BAL are and why do we do them. Okay. Then you should know the typical histories with which the patient of tuberculosis will present, pulmonary TB, or malignancy will present. For history of malignancies, you should know the paraneoplastic syndromes which are associated with lung carcinomas so that you can associate your histories towards the diagnosis. Okay. Then for infections, again, like immunocompromised patients, you should know what all infections can take place in them. All right. That's it. Anybody has any other doubts? Emphysema patients are called pink puffers because of their facial appearance. उनका face red appear होता है pink color का because they're hyperventilating ना, that is why they are called as pink puffers. Okay, any more doubts? No, no doubt. Okay. Now to sum up, this you can watch this movie. It's about a professor who was diagnosed with lung tumor. So it basically does not show much about the lung tumor, but the movie is good. It's Johnny Depp starring. Okay, and that's it. I think if nobody has any more doubts, then we can end it. Okay? All right. No more doubts. Thank you.